I remember very well the day that I met Daniel. You know, the poor guy had been in a fairly substantial and significant motor vehicle collision. You know, Daniel's a guy, he works with his body. He's in construction, he builds decks. He was worried about how his injuries might put him out of work. And he was not feeling good. His body was not working the way he was accustomed to it working. And the first concern that he had is, how am I going to take care of my wife? How am I going to take care of my children, my responsibilities at home? Of course, he was also really concerned about, how do I get better so I can get back to where I need to be?
Pretty much I was working near home, and on my way home from lunch, I was driving down a road, approaching a green light, and just as soon as I was right at the intersection, a vehicle just pulled out right in front of me, almost like their light turned red, you know? But it happened so fast, I couldn't even react, other than to know I need to hit the brakes. And as soon as I slammed and braced, I couldn't even turn. I hit him and threw his vehicle down probably 50 yards or so. Mine spun around, pushed in my engine into my truck, totaled the truck, airbag deployed, glass everywhere, tools everywhere. It was pretty traumatic. I don't remember the actual spinning other than finally coming to a standstill, you know, and seeing all the smoke everywhere clearing. So it's pretty traumatic, yeah.
In fact, the crash was so bad that the fellow that hit him had to be taken from the crash site by ambulance, and we know that even that guy was in the hospital for 2 days in the ICU.
It was very evident from the beginning that the insurance company was going to be denying the liability on the case, or at least challenging the liability. They wanted to place fault on Mr. Reyna for the collision, and it was evident that he was going to need representation for that, given the fact that he was injured and he was having ongoing issues for weeks after the car crash happened. Well, this is what we do every day. We deal with insurance companies in and out, and a lot of people have never even been involved in an accident or a collision, so they do not know what to do or even what to say whenever the insurance company calls them up after this car crash happened. And because of that, a lot of times the insurance companies take advantage of that, and they will go ahead and obtain information that is not really relevant, but yet they'll use it against the person who was involved in the collision. And from that, we take control over that whole dealings with the insurance company from the beginning, so that these people that were just involved in a collision are not having to deal with that, and they are not, you know, giving information that is not needed, or they are actually being represented properly and not just doing this on their own.
So Daniel suffered herniated disc both in his cervical spine as well as in his lumbar spine in this crash. And one of the obstacles that we had was that in some of the medical records, not both of those areas were mentioned. And so there was an argument that had been created by lawyers and that we had basically made that up along the way. Another obstacle was that Daniel worked construction. And to provide for his wife and children, he had to go to work. And so the defense was taking the position that, well, shoot, he worked, so he must be fine, which just wasn't the reality of the situation. So what we did is we looked at his medical records, we looked at his medical history, which didn't support the defense's theory whatsoever. And we dug in and we started taking a look at what the experts were actually saying. We cross-examined them, and we cross-examined them in little bits and pieces about what injuries actually were caused and how much would they admit to us was actually caused by this crash. When we put those pieces together, it painted a picture of the full amount of the injury that Daniel had suffered. And we finally were able to present that to the defense and start to get some movement out of them.
Despite all these commercials and all these advertisements you see out there in the world, that you're in good hands, that there's a good neighbor, it's all a lie. What people are shocked to find out is in the state of Texas, an insurance company owes no duty of good faith or fair dealing when they're dealing with someone that their insured entity hit. Basically what that means is they can lie to you, They can treat you badly. They can hide the ball. And you got to believe it, the insurance industry does all those things every day. And that's, unfortunately, that's the conversation I had to have with Daniel. It was important that we prepare him for the challenges I knew he was going to face.
After someone is involved in a collision like Mr. Reyna was, it is very important that all of their symptoms and their injuries are properly documented with doctors. And that is because otherwise there's no way to prove that they were actually injured from the collision. Other than that, too, it's really important that they're seeing the right medical providers to treat them for their injuries. And other times, people don't know what to do, or they're just in pain and they need some kind of guidance with that. And that is something that we are able to provide for them, guidance through the process, and not only through their injuries, but getting to the right medical providers. And that's something we were able to do for Mr. Reyna as well.
Absolutely, insurance companies bank on ignorance. They expect that if they offer any amount of money, that most people will take it. And unfortunately, it's true. Most people will. Insurance companies thereby collect the premiums and then pay out very little on claims the bulk of the time. The only way that you're ever going to be able to get fair compensation is if you go to somebody who knows how to hold that insurance company accountable and call them at their game. One of the things that is typical in these cases, but we were able to prove it in Daniel's case because of an admission, the primary defendant's expert in this case actually agreed with the following statement. I formed opinions, drafted a report, and even offered sworn testimony in this case before I ever examined Daniel Reyna. He admitted that. And doesn't that tell us everything we need to know about what these insurance companies are doing and the bed that they lie in with these doctors?
The way the Carlson Law Firm was there for me throughout all this was I always had somebody I could call. And aside from them being there, letting me know they're on my side and that they're doing everything they can and and they're fighting for me as much as they could, especially against an insurance company that was not budging, and so they helped me to sustain in my everyday life, to kind of get plans going and meet certain goals. Always kept me informed of what the process, and they warned me from the beginning it was going to take, it's going to take some time. So they were there the whole time, just kind of giving me good mental guidance, advice, helping me whenever they could within all the guidelines and parameters that they can. So yeah, it was extremely helpful.
So would you say that you're happy with the outcome?
Extremely happy. Yeah, extremely happy. The guys did awesome. As somebody that's been through it, you wouldn't want anybody else on your side. Just to be there with you from the beginning to the end, mentally, emotionally. They had the right people in place. Always fighting, always working. So I always felt like they were just doing their thing, even behind the scenes when nobody else was there. They were always working. So
There are many hundreds, if not thousands, of lawyers in Texas that would be happy to represent someone in a car crash. That's the truth. The difference is, do you want to go to a lawyer that looks at you as a commodity, or someone who wants to tell your story? That's the difference at the Carlson Law Firm, and that's the difference on this team that worked for Daniel Reyna. You have to care enough about the person to tell their story, and that's what we do here.